Hello, welcome to our second episode of the DFW Sports United in Action, a roadmap for change. My name is Nicole Britenriker, and I'm the Vice President of the Black Sports Professionals North Texas. As we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, we are proud to collaborate with WISE and DICE to deliver this four-part series to equip and activate DFW sports and entertainment professionals to action, personally, organizationally, and in the community, as three equally yoked groups reflective of the industry as a whole that recognize the opportunity and need for a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive change universally. These virtual events are free and open to everyone in the sports and entertainment community in DFW and beyond, and will take place every 2 weeks on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Central Time for 45 minutes. Our future events are October 14th and October 28th, so mark your calendars. I would like to now invite Hunter Harvin, our Vice President of DICE DFW, to say a few opening remarks.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm thrilled we're able to continue this impactful series together today, focused on allyship. Please be on the lookout for the Blueprint for Action to follow today's webinar. It'll address how to be an active ally through education, individual action personally and professionally, as well as in the community. I know our esteemed speakers today will also be sharing their own personal stories that'll serve as great examples of how to lead in our industry and take that action. We hope you'll join us in being united for action. Now I'd like to hand it over to Natalie Jenkins, Vice President of WISE, to introduce our featured speakers and moderator today.
Thank you, Nicole and Hunter, and thank you all of you for joining here today. It was actually brought to my attention that today happens to be the late Fannie Lou Hamer's birthday. Fannie Lou, if you're not familiar, dedicated her life to leading community activities that promoted voting and civil rights. She was a really influential activist during her time, and without her, we would not be where we are today. Unfortunately, I feel like we're still kind of fighting for a lot of the same changes that she was then now. And I'm just thankful that there's members of these three organizations that have stepped up to take on this effort as part of our roadmap for change. It's really important to us, and we're just so thankful and glad that we have the pleasure of hearing from three people in our industry that are really leading the way and doing something now to support that change. We're going to be joined today by Marty McDonald, founder of Boss Women Media Group, Linnet Carty, the Director of Inclusion and Community Engagement for the PGA of America, and Kevin Clayton, the Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, and Engagement for the Cleveland Cavaliers operating company. Before I turn it over to Marty to lead us through this, what I think is going to be a wonderful talk and discussion, just want to encourage everybody that's joining us here today to take this time that we've set aside and really listen, engage, and please use the Q&A to ask questions. Listen for things that you might be able to do within your organization or your own life to be a better ally or to become an ally if you're not already. So even if it's something small. But with that, I want to get to the good stuff, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Marty.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you guys for having me as the moderator, and I am super excited to get into this chat. I mean, allyship and what's happening in our community and the lives of so many people right now is such an important topic, and I can only imagine workplace conversations that are happening right now for change and impact to be made. So I'm super excited to have Linnet and Kevin be today's speakers to really shed some insight and to shed light into conversations that are happening. So welcome, guys. I just want to jump right into the first question, and really that's around allyship. And can you guys share, start with you, Linnet, about allyship? What is allyship, and what is allyship that is not happening in different spaces and places? Linnet, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. So let me talk a little bit about what allyship means to me. I'll say that, first of all, it's a verb. And so in my head, it requires action, right? And for me, action begins with what I call the foundational part, which is social justice inclusion for all of the dimensions of diversity, not just gender equity. I know that that is our focus today, but a lot of this applies to all of the dimensions of diversity. And with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think this has been very timely for you to have this. It is really a time where we really have to assess sort of where we've come historically and where we're headed, right? So, you know, some of the biggest facets, I believe, of allyship is, number one, building a relationship with others that are really authentic, that are genuine, ones that are trustworthy and honest, and to actively advocate for others through a culture of inclusion, right? So by that, I mean to be intentional, to be consistent, to be explicit, and to take ownership of the struggle of the person or the organization that you choose to align yourself with to help. And I think what's most important is that you're able to use your advantage. Some might call it a benefit. Others might call it privilege. But you have to use that in order to help those that don't have it. And it's important to be vocal, because even if you're only vocal with the person that you want to be an ally for, you can't be silent. You have to speak up, and you have to courageously speak up, even when you don't know exactly what to say. You might want to lead with that. You know, I see what's going on. I know that it's not right. I'm not exactly sure what to say, but I want you to know that I'm sort of here to help and to sort of, can we right the ship? And then do your own personal work. It begins with personal. So you have to educate yourself. And I mean that through a cultural education, to learn about gender equity, to learn about inclusion and what that looks like. And then ask yourself, what can you really do to help? And then do the professional side of that work by acknowledging that there needs to be systemic changes. You want to be a really good listener, and I mean a really good listener, not just hear, but listen and ask questions. And then be unapologetically comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because you have to know the difference when somebody is just fitting in or if they truly belong, right? There's a huge difference there. And always remember that, I guess, the acknowledgement of allyship doesn't come from you, it comes from the person who you're trying to be an ally with. That's really where that acknowledgement comes. And just in general, some of the things that are not allyship, or I guess, you know, don't expect to be taught, and try not to compare your struggle to other people's struggles. Sometimes that happens. That doesn't mean you shouldn't share, but there's an appropriate time to share. And try not to take credit for the labor of women who have been marginalized in the workplace, and don't make assumptions that everybody sort of feels the same. And what are a couple other don'ts I would say? Don't victim blame, don't withdraw, don't get started and go, oh, it's too much, I don't think I can do it. You know,
Yeah.
Stand in it, because there's gonna be a part that is gonna be painful and not good. You know, it's it's, you know, productive distress, right? You're gonna go through that, but you have to be courageous enough to go through that. And don't deny that the problem is fixable, because everything is fixable, even when it's systemic. So I'll stop there.
Oh, that was great. I mean, I think that, you know, two things that you said that really stood out is being courageous and building relationships. And that's, you know, that's allyship. Kevin, can you share with us your insights around allyship, of what it is and what it isn't?
Sure, Marty. And first, let me just say thank you to WISE, also Dallas United for Action, and also Black Sports Professionals of North Dallas for having me. And Linnet, you've hit most of it on the head, so I'm going to approach it slightly different. And I need to qualify my comments first, as many of your audience listeners may be saying, well, why is a male talking about allyship for women? So I was raised by 3 women, and I have 4 daughters, all of which are in the business world. And they have taught me very well around what it takes to be an ally. And I look at it a little slightly different from this perspective, is that when I think about allyship, it's a lot of the things that Linnet said, and oftentimes it's kind of people cheering on other people, or women in the workplace, and you have men and women cheering them on and saying, hey, I got your back. And I really understand what you're going through, the empathy part. So to me, that isn't necessarily allyship. That's having somebody's back and having empathy. Allyship is when I come down off of the banks of the side of the water, if you will, and I see a female colleague or someone who is in my organization that's rowing in this sea of maybe sexism, and I jump in the boat with her. I don't sit back and cheer. I want to know, okay, you're bailing water right now because certain things are happening to your career. Certain feedback you're getting isn't as accurate as maybe you want it to be, isn't as honest as you want it to be. So I need to be able to jump in the boat with my female colleagues to understand exactly what they're going through, not me cheering from the sidelines. So when I think about allyship, I think about advocacy. I think about listening, as Linnet said, but more importantly, I can't put myself in the shoes of a female. So I need to listen to those things that are important, and then whatever power I may have in my organization by being a senior leader, I need to take action. Because just listening is listening, talking is talking, but if males that are empowered don't take action, then we are colluding into a system that is keeping women from progressing in their careers.
That's awesome. First of all, three women raised you, 4 daughters. You've been around a lot of females, and I'm pretty sure they've taught you a lot around it, which is a great segue into our next question. Linnet, for you, and then Kevin, would love for you to chime in on why are allies so important for women, and is there a difference between allyship for white women and women of color? And if there is a difference, what are those differences?
So, allyship is really important for all women. And as Kevin alluded to, we might not be the voice at the table. And that ally is that person who is going to be an advocate for us in the room where we may not be in the room, or, on a golf course where the deals are made, right? So allies usually hold that power to affect change. And they're the ones that will know how to leverage that power to bring about those equitable changes and make sure that you're a part of that process, because you're the one with the great ideas and the ways to sort of move that forward. Your ally is really supposed to be almost more than an advocate, because they're the ones that are sharing your professional ideas and successes with others who you may not interact with in the workplace. It's also more like a sponsor, I'd like to say, as opposed to a mentor, because the ally is important when it comes to you actually moving up within the company, whether it be promotion, professional development opportunities, being included in a succession plan, because they see that in you that they know they are missing. And so, being included in that process, I think, is crucial. And I also believe that allies can promote gender inclusion and sort of demonstrate those behaviors that reflect activism. And that in turn is what helps to dismantle those systems that exclude. And, sometimes people don't know where to start. And I always say, start by asking a thoughtful question. A lot of people are afraid to rock the boat. Well, don't rock the boat. You already know what the answer is. So just ask the question and then let someone else come up with the answer, or talk around why things are the way they are. And then you can say, well, what can we do to change it? So, leveraging all of that power, I think, is really important. Do I think that there's a difference between Black and white women? I would say, I don't think there's a difference in needing allies. I will say there is a difference in the workplace as to where Black women are and where white women are, and who is going to have the advantage. And I don't have to even say that for you. You already know what that is. So yes, we all need allies, but I think we need them a little bit more as a woman of color.
Absolutely. Kevin?
Sure. And I want to pick up on what Linnet said around kind of the conversation about being a mentor, a sponsor, and then I want to add another term, which is being a champion. And what I have found in my career, which goes back to my days at Procter & Gamble and through other organizations, is that if women do not have a combination of all three, they are at a disadvantage. And I mean a formal mentor, a formal sponsor, and a champion. So let me define what the three are. So there are mentorship programs that are structured where an individual or a person coming into an organization is assigned a mentor that is really more institutionalized. It's not necessarily an organic relationship, but it can be. But a lot of organizations have formal mentor programs. So Marty, if you're coming into my organization with the Cavaliers and I'm your mentor and I get assigned, I don't know anything about you. I'm just kind of fulfilling a functional role. However, for me to be your champion, that means that, look, I'm going to get to know Marty. I'm going to understand Marty's career path. I'm going to sit down with you and I'm going to help you navigate through the organization. And a sponsor, and the difference between that is a sponsor is somebody in which, and I really suggest this for women going through corporate America, is that you have somebody that when you don't have a seat at the table and men and others are sitting there talking about who's going to get the next assignment, who's going to get the promotion, that you have somebody who is your sponsor that is an advocate for you at the table. And all three of these individuals don't have to necessarily be at the senior levels in an organization. Now, the question is, does it impact women of color differently? Obviously, not a woman of color, but there were 7 of them that I told you had an influence in my life. So one of the things that I have done, and most recently here with the Cavaliers, we had started our ERGs, which we call TMRGs, our team member resource groups, and a lot of organizations have them. And as the female group was starting, what they decided was, hey, we're going to have one group. And I intervened and said, understand that there are differences for women of color. Well, let me be more specific. There are different needs for Black women versus Latinx women versus Asian women versus white women. So you can have, yes, a female ERG, but understand that there are differences that absolutely need to be identified and worked through for those certain groups of women. There's a recent study that I actually have read around, it's a McKinsey study. And if you correlate the impact of who's at the senior levels of organizations, and the numbers show that it's white males, white females, men of color, guess who's at the bottom of the row? Women of color. When I was at P&G, one of the studies that we did was we looked at the entry points into our organization and who actually kind of connected from a mentorship standpoint, or who actually at the levels of like 12 months, 18 months, who kind of felt that they got it, that they felt that they were part of the organization. And those studies came back to show that white males within the first 6 to 9 months felt that they got it and they were part of the organization. Then it was actually men of color about 12 to 14 months that they felt that they got it. And then it was white women around the same interval. Women of color, it took 16 to 18 months. So, and the reason why is because they didn't have the natural systemic support in the organization that others did. And at some point during the discussion, we could talk about what some of those differences are between women of color and white women as it relates to coming into the organization that is predominantly led by white men. There is really statistical data that would suggest why there's a connecting point. But I'm also gonna, at some point, you know, Linnet, you may want to chime in on that because you're probably more qualified as a woman of color than I am.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because in as we move through, I think it's interesting because you can't, if you can't see yourself in an organization in leadership, you can't see the possibility.
Yes.
And if you can't see the possibility, you can't grow. But what you said, Kevin, around mentorship versus sponsorship versus being a champion can't happen in a solo environment from ethnicity to ethnicity. It has to be shown through diversity. And a white man has to lean into women of color and white women have to lean into Black women. And that's how change is going to happen, but not, I'm just going to lean into a white man to a white man.
Right.
So, Kevin, you talked a little bit about that specifically. What changes as a leader in the Cavs organization have you made to ensure women are afforded equal opportunities and are positioned for success? And then
Yes.
Linnet, I would love to hear your thoughts and insight as well.
Yeah. So as much as I would like to take credit for a couple of these changes, I can't. A few of these happened before I came on board. A year ago, the league did a study around where women were situated in our organization on the business side. And what we saw was very similar to the McKinsey study that I shared with you, that women were kind of at the bottom of the totem pole as it related to the numbers that were in management positions. So the mandate kind of came out from the league office saying, look, we want each team to put together a plan on one, how they are going to promote and develop more women leaders in the organization. Secondly, what we did right before that was we did a pay equity study to make sure that from a pay standpoint that there was equity there. And then the third thing that we identified was the creation, in the very first ERG that we had was one that was it was called the Women of Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. So we put together a support group around our female employees, our female team members. We took a look at the systemic barriers that were keeping them from being promoted, paid, and feedback and recognition, all of those systems that to make sure that they were equitable. And then we actually had a very specific plan that said, one, from a hiring standpoint, we want to represent the demographics of our community. In Cleveland, it's 50% female, 50% male. So we started putting targets around that at all levels, and also made sure that our promotion rate was commensurate with those goals and objectives. The point is, if you don't make systemic changes and you leave it to happenstance, you're going to get the results that we are seeing. And that's people who are comfortable with other people, let it be men or women, that's who's going to get promoted. Unfortunately, in our industry, from a sports standpoint, women aren't at the top of the house, so they're not in a position to make the systemic changes that are required.
Linnet?
I love all the things that, Kevin just pointed out, and a lot of that, of course, is from data. And so if you don't take that sort of data-driven decision-making approach, you're going to miss out because the numbers never lie. You can't argue with the numbers. And so, we've done that at the PGA. It's been great. They've taken the data and looked at many things across the board. I'm happy to say that, we're about equal male to female in terms of our employment. And we've taken a look at, what the wage gap looks like in leadership positions and all of those things. And then we've hit it from the education side, which is really important for us, especially in terms of educating our 29,000 PGA professionals across the country who may not be as savvy as we would like in terms of talking about equity and inclusion and diversity and all of those things. And so we actually have I've created some gender-specific topics that I've delivered across the country: gender equity, the art of the ask, the language of inclusion, and those specifically hit that target so that when men and women are interacting, that relationship, although it be new and a first time, that it go a little bit smoothly, a little bit more smoothly. And then lastly, I'd like to talk about our leadership program, which started the year before I got there, but I've been really instrumental in sort of lifting that program to the heights that it is now. We're at 4 years. It's called PGA Lead. It's a 2-year curated program that was developed for diverse PGA professionals to move up through the ranks of volunteer leadership in the association. And as we know, Susie Whaley is our president, our first woman president, but other than that, it's all white males. And so what I'm really proud to say is since the inception of PGA Lead, we have, we have 1 president, 2 vice presidents, 5 board members, and 15 on national committees. That data is crazy. And then to disaggregate that data down to women, it's still good. We have 2 women vice presidents. We have 2 that are on section boards, and we have 7 that are on national committees. So we have these voices at the table now that are going to make a difference, and it's tremendous. It's tremendous when you can make that kind of change.
That's amazing. That's amazing with the work that you're doing at the PGA. Kevin, you talked a little bit about some of the programs that are being put into place, and we know that there is a pay gap between men and women. Where did this start, and why has it continued in terms of the pay gap? And has the gap widened for Black women versus Latino women? And can you just share some insights into that? And basically, really, not just the insights, but what could we be doing for change to happen?
Sure. So the first question around where did it start and how did it start? For me, quite simply, in all the work that I've done and been in this space, it starts because of the biases that men have towards the value of what women bring to an organization. And I mean, I'm just trying to keep it real. So therefore,
I mean, all the way.
yeah. So if my bias is that if I see in the workplace a woman as to not necessarily her being equal to me, then I'm not going to pay her equally. I'm not going to give her the same kind of responsibilities and challenges. So that's the first part in dealing with biases that men have in general. You asked me about women of color, and I don't know, was the question comparing Latinx women versus African American, and from that perspective? Yeah. So personally, I've not seen a pay inequity against those two dimensions of diversity compared to each other. I have seen it for where white women are paid slightly more, but quite honestly, from what I've seen in 4 or 5 different arenas and industries that I've worked in, it's all women are paid a disproportionate amount. Now, I was fortunate also to have a similar job with the USTA, which is the United States Tennis Association, and sat on the board of the Women's Sports Foundation, which is Billie Jean King's organization. So I learned a lot about what needs to happen relative to pay equity. And if you think about what Billie Jean King stood for, she's like, we're not going to have it. We can play at the same level. We can perform at the same level. And because of the experience I had at being at the US Open and seeing the different purse amounts being different, if someone doesn't have the courage to bring it to the attention in an organization, then it's going to continue. So one, having, again, those champions that are going to bring it to the attention of the organization. Secondly, having an organization that recognizes the value of all people, and particularly that women are equally valued. And then thirdly, which I have seen, and at some point in my career, I might have been guilty of, and that is not giving women the same assignments and giving them the same experiences. Yeah, women can do exactly the same thing that a man can do, and we should pay them accordingly.
Let them know, Kevin. Let them know, okay? In terms of the pay equity, Black Women Equal Pay Day is August the 8th, which basically is saying that Black women get paid 53 cents on the dollar what a white man gets paid, which between a Black woman and a white woman gets paid 83 cents on every dollar. So, I mean, there definitely is conversations that need to continue to be had in terms of how we make change.
So Marty, it may be me, but your mic, can anybody else?
Did it just go out? Can you hear
Well,
me?
we can.
I'm gonna have to speak louder. Okay. In terms of professionals, right? 71% of human resource professionals nationally are women. What role may women play in perpetuating the pay gap disparities, and how do we fix it? And similar to what I just said around, Black Women Equal Pay Day versus white women equal pay day, white women get paid 83 cents on the dollar versus a Black woman gets paid 53 cents on every dollar. And so even in the role of Black women or minorities being in human resource roles more, that's interesting, because why would they not be bringing in more people, right, that look like them to fill some of the roles within these organizations?
Yeah, my male counterpart's about to hate me here. So I think the first part of your question was the fact that 71% of HR professionals are women and females. And then at a higher level, you'll see still a higher percentage of women. So you would think simply, it's like, okay, if women are guiding and directing HR, where you typically would have salary, feedback, reward recognition, promotion, you would have all those systems that drive an organization, then why would we have pay inequities? Why would we have promotion inequities? Why would we have assignment inequities? The thing is that because we don't have women at the CEO level and at the COO level, there is an unconscious collusion of them, in my opinion, and based on what I've seen, where women that are leading HR functions are basically, they're defaulting into a system that they're required to default into. They're sitting there with the information, they're sitting there with the data. They can, and I've seen women who have made the recommendations about some of these disparities, but yet the organization doesn't want to take action against it. So that's why it happens. So the question is, then what can happen out of that? I mean, how can we go above and beyond? That's where it takes courage. That's why I mentioned it takes a Billie Jean King. It takes somebody who is in that seat saying, enough, no, I'm not going to continue to do this. This is wrong. But putting together a business case around it, not necessarily just looking at it on paper and saying there's a pay inequity, but putting together what that has to do. And I'm sure there are turnover numbers that you can relate that to. In industry, particularly in the sports industry, you do have women that are turning over at a faster rate than males. And a lot of that has to do with the systems aren't set up to support women in the way they are to support men, although women are over those systems. So it does take male leadership at the top of the house to open the doors for women to do the things that they can see on paper, but yet are subconsciously really colluding because they can't do anything.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thank you for being courageous enough to even say that out loud. Linnet, for you, for all of the women who are joining the webinar today, are there things that, we can do to ensure we're being compensated fairly and equally? And how can men bridge the pay gap?
That's a great question. I look at fair pay, equitable pay as not only being somewhat of a moral issue and an economic issue, but it's also part of an association's or an organization's or corporation's fiscal responsibility. And as Kevin alluded to, there's a big gap. Women typically earn 80% of what men do. And for Black women, that's 61%. And for Latinas, it's 53%, according to Forbes. So I think that, number one, women really need to be confident in our talents and our skills. For example, I read something a couple years ago that said, if a man is looking for a position and there are 10 skills and he only has 5, he goes for that position. But if a woman is going for that position and she only has 8 out of the 10 skills, she does not go for the position. So we have to be more confident in ourselves and say, I'm missing 2 of those skills, but I know I can get those skills and I am going to apply for that position. I think we need to do our homework, that we have to research similar positions for compensation comparisons. That's really important to do that, not only in your region, but in other regions as well, because I've seen that used as sort of a variable as to why there is a pay discrepancy. And I also think employers need to be more transparent and allow employees to really discuss wages without fear of retribution. And, for women, I'm going to tell you right now, because I'm guilty, I didn't know my 3 W's. You have a wish, what you want to be paid. You have a want, what you want to be paid. And you got that walk. I'm going to walk if I don't get it. And you have to stick to it. Negotiate. Guilty. I did not do that. I was just so thrilled to get the position. I would have said yes if they said $2, because I would have done it for free. I was just, when you're happy to do what you really love.
Yeah.
But then when you get in it and you realize I could have negotiated and made a ton more money. So it's a lesson learned. And so I'm going to encourage women to speak up, speak out, negotiate. I don't care, even if you don't get more money, get more time off, because I love extra vacation days. There's plenty of other things that you can get to sort of balance those scales, right? And how can men be more supportive? Just what Kevin said.
Yeah. They
can be that advocate for equitable wages. They can advocate for professional development and promotions and succession planning and all those things, because they are typically in those positions to do so.
That's really great, Linnet. Thank you. for sharing that insight. And thank both of you guys for going through and sharing all types of insight around equity and allyship and inclusion. I want to open it up, Neil, for our Q&A section. There's a couple of questions that have come over, and any of you guys feel free to chime in. Adrian sent a question in and asked, is there a difference between allyship and solidarity?
So for me, I don't think so. I think those are two different terms. I mean, if you haven't, based on how I define ally, if you're going to get in the boat with me, or I'm gonna get in the boat with a woman that their boat is sinking and I'm bailing water, I'm providing solidarity because I'm right there in the mix. So real allyship, if you don't have solidarity, it's not, for me, real allyship. But
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian sent over a question, and he asked around the importance of allies recognizing the need for equity, and justice, as opposed to simply just equality. Can you guys shed some light on the difference between what the two really mean, equity and justice versus just equality?
Sure, there's an image that I wish I had ready to pull up and show you, but many of you have probably seen that image of 3 young children, different heights, all at a ball game, trying to watch the ball game from behind a fence. And so equality is putting each child on a box. The tallest child can actually see the game, but the other 2 can't. Equity means there's a box for the tallest child to see over, a taller box for the next child to see over, and the tallest box for the 3rd child to see over. And to me, that's the difference, right? That is the difference. And you know, when you look at social systems and justice, that's what happened many, many years ago. That whole separate but equal was not equal. So, you know, I think that's a good example to give, that when people think things are equal, they might be equal, but they're not equitable.
Absolutely. I love this next question, and would love to hear both of you guys' thoughts on it, around affirmative action, and how has affirmative action basically impacted our community, specifically from a Black person perspective, and how can it be managed and implemented where it feels equitable across the board?
yeah, so the term affirmative action, and unfortunately, I'm old enough to actually been around for affirmative action when it kind of began to be vogue in business. It's really a positive. If you think about affirmative, that's a positive. You're affirming action. You're taking action. And it was set up to create part of the inequities that Linnet just talked about. The fact that you had people of color and women not being hired into organizations at the same rate commensurate with the population. So it was, how do we take affirmative action to do that? Now, over a period of time, though, it became, and we've all heard this term, and for those of you who don't know where it came from, check the box. It came from affirmative action. It was, I'll check the box, and affirmative action was a government program that said you would not get government funding unless you had A, B, C, D. Well, hell, if I check the box, I get government funding, I got A, B, C, D. I don't care if A, B, C, D progress in the organization, get promoted, they can leave, they can do whatever, I get the check of the box. So over a period of time, that's really where diversity came into play. And diversity was like, nah, you know what? We're going to take a look at all dimensions of diversity and create an environment in a workplace where everyone can bring their whole selves to an organization and be productive. That was the thought. But the myth of that was that you didn't have inclusion, because you can have diversity and not have inclusion. You can bring women into an organization and say, look at all the women we have. But if you don't create an environment that includes them, all you've done is check the box. So to answer your question, the question directly around, can it be good for everybody? I wouldn't say affirmative action without having culture change that has systemic change is not going to be good for anybody. Because if it's just about the numbers, then you're always going to focus on the numbers and not the quality of experience it allows women and people of color to grow in an organization.
Totally agree with what Kevin said. I'll just add one more caveat, is that for some people's perception that think that affirmative action is about, one person getting a spot over another person, wrong. It's about the opportunity for somebody of color who might not have had the opportunity to interview and to be brought to the table to show off their talents, to have that talent, because nobody wants a position because of their color. We want to be hired because we were the best candidate, period.
Absolutely. Last question for you guys on today's panel. Terry sent in, one of her sisters is a CEO, and she understands that organizations need resource groups, right? And resource groups can be a powerful tool, specifically around ERG. How do you activate ERGs that give value and equity to women of color so that women of color are chosen to be ceiling smashers and the activity of the ERG is brave?
So as I just mentioned, we launched our team member resource groups recently. And from what I've seen in my experience with ERGs is for women of color, they typically belong to more than one. They belong to the the ERG that represents them from a ethnic or race standpoint, and they also belong to the women or female group. So the combination of the two gives them voice in both, because what we talked about earlier, the challenges of a female of color is that she really doesn't fit 100% in either group. So therefore, kind of the question around, how do you create that is having the expansion of multiple ERGs and being very specific for women of color, that your needs, your challenges, your barriers can be addressed between the combination of multiple groups. And that's really the nuance, where it's not a one size fits all for women of color.
Again, I agree. The PGA, what was great is that our COO, Daryl Krall, is actually who started our multicultural roundtable group to address some things that we knew we could work on and really have them align with our strategic goals. Now we'll be starting our BRGs, which is our business resource groups, over the next month. And we are really excited to roll that out because we now have, a good flavor for what people are looking for and some of the goals that people want to do, which will allow them to sort of showcase their talents and their strengths that they might not be able to do in the marketing department or the finance department or the championships department. So it's a really wonderful way for us to get together and blossom. And they're open to everyone, which is what I really love.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Thanks, Linnet. Thanks, Kevin, for leaning in, for sharing your insight, and for leaving everyone who's listening and joining us with a little bit more information and knowledge that they can implement in their workplaces and environments.
Thank you
so much. I appreciate you having me. It was great, and pleasure to meet all of you. And I just want to end with RBG saying, women belong in all places where decisions are being made.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna leave it on that note. I agree.
Close it out, but I think that's it. No, really, on behalf of Wise Dice and Black Sports Professionals of North Texas, thank you, Marty and Kevin and Linnet, for taking the time to be here with us today. I think we all can appreciate your getting real with us and being honest as well. So thank you for that. And it seemed like the words that came up a lot were brave and courage. And so everybody that's on this call, keep it going. Visit our website, which is, let me make sure I get it right, dfwsportsunitedinaction.com. We have a lot of resources that are going to help you to arm you with the ability to have a little more courage to make some change. So join us and as we go down this road and continue down this road. And our next time that we will all be together will be with Dr. Richard Lapchick on Wednesday, October 14th at 2 o'clock. So hope to see you all then. Thank you, everybody. Bye.